He's the preseason play-by-play voice of the Jets. You'll hear him call NFL games all season on CBS. Ian Eagle's here to preview the 2022 Jets today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, September 9th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you for making this show your first listen or first watch every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday, and we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Big shout out to subscribers to this podcast. Just hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening, and you'll receive notifications as new episodes are posted, so you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give the show a 5-star review. It helps us out tremendously. So does giving this episode a big thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Today, our episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, today's a special day on the podcast. We are joined by Ian Eagle of CBS Sports. Ian is the Jets play-by-play voice on TV in preseason. Every single year he's kind enough to stop by. This is actually a 2-part episode. We're going to have our second part tomorrow. We'll have a special Saturday episode to conclude our season preview with Ian Eagle, but today is the first part. So let's jump into my conversation with Ian. Joining us today is, I guess, now the former voice of the NBA copyright warning, Ian Eagle. Ian, welcome back to the show.
John, thank you. The years are now running together, and I have no idea how many consecutive years we've done this before the regular season opener.
We did miss 2020 because there was no preseason there. So that's kind of the hole that prevents this from being like a Cal Ripken type streak, but I'm so glad to have you back.
Great to be here. Great to speak with you again. And obviously, exciting time around the NFL with the new season. It feels a little like the first day of school. That's that chipper, joyous feeling you get every year when this time of year rolls around.
Yeah, especially because it's the time of year where you get to do this podcast.
That's the reason. I mean, the football is secondary. It's the podcast.
In my mind, the real reason you call Jets preseason game is just to prep yourself for this podcast. That's what I've decided, whether it's true or not.
Yeah, I tell my agent every year, look, everything else is secondary. I must do this podcast, which means I must do the preseason games, so I'm prepared to discuss at length particular items that I would not have the necessary insight into unless I did the other steps. So you got it. You figured it out, John. After all these years, you cracked the code.
Well, thank you for putting in all the work for me and my audience to gain insight on the Jets. Let's begin talking about just the general mood around the team. Now, we're going to have to get into Zach Wilson's injury, but just generally speaking, did you notice when you were around in preseason, a different type of vibe? It's year 2 for Robert Saleh, year 2 for Zach Wilson, kind of year 2 of this next attempt the Jets have made at the rebuild. How would you compare things in Florham Park this year to the way they were this time last year?
Yeah, so the way things were set up, one of the preseason games that we did, we had 2 broadcasts. One was a national game, so we didn't cover that one. It was ESPN against Atlanta. First game was a road game in Philadelphia. The Jets wanted to treat it as such, so we met with the team on the road at their hotel the day before the game. Second game was a home game against the Giants, so we ended up going to Florham Park and treated it as if we were covering the game when the Jets were the home team, where you go to the facility, you meet with the head coach, you watch a little bit of practice, then you meet with the players. The first meeting, you could definitely feel it. You could definitely feel an energy from the team and a sense that the team recognizes they just have more talent. There's more to work with than a year ago. A year ago, there was the novelty for Robert Saleh. first-time head coach doing these meetings and trying to figure out how to divvy up his time more than anything else. I think that was probably the biggest challenge for him, was the responsibilities of being a head coach, meeting with the media, and not just locking in on a particular group of position players or a side of the team, defense. It was spreading yourself around and making sure you were doing the work that's necessary to be a head coach, to be a leader. And I think he has a better handle on that in year two, and acknowledged such in our meetings. And there was just a very positive vibe throughout the team that they had been in training camp. They had gotten a look at the young players. There was an injection of youth and confidence. And you could tell this group, this draft class, is taking a lot of pride in maybe being the class that could turn things around. Philadelphia game happens, obviously the injury to Zach Wilson, and it shifts the tenor a bit because it took a little bit of the air out of the balloon. And just looking back on it, I felt this live and I felt it in the moment. I think I stated it on the preseason telecast. Because Zach threw a pick at opening Jets possession, I think he tried to do a little too much on the next set of downs. And that's why instead of going down and the possibility of just going out of bounds or leaning down so that you just move on to the next down, he just wanted extra yardage. And that's why he cut and made his move upfield. And we now know how that was not a wise choice on his part, and it turned out to be a legitimate injury, a serious injury. But when we met with them prior to the home game against the Giants, I still felt the optimism, and there is some juice with this team. There is certainly belief on the defensive side of the ball that they're going to be much more competitive offensively, that they have more weapons, more players to lean on at the wide receiver position, at the running back position. And we're going to get into the offensive line, of course, as well. But yeah, to answer your question, you could feel a difference. I'm not saying a year ago they just accepted their fate. There was high effort and they were hoping things would click, and some of the good stuff they saw from Zach in the preseason would translate into the regular season. But we saw the kind of mistakes that rookie quarterbacks make, and he made a ton of them. So year two, the hope was he was going to cut down on those and just play freer and not necessarily think out there, react and use the talent and skill, the raw talent that he has, to go out and make things happen and really take this offense to the next step. But clearly we're not going to see that for probably the first month of the regular season.
And the whole way the situation played out was kind of interesting because even on Tuesday this week, Robert Saleh said that, he might be playing Sunday, and then out of nowhere, now he's out 3 weeks at least. Do you think they knew the whole time Wilson was going to be out? I'm trying to piece together. I mean, it's just speculation. I'm wondering whether you have any insight, or maybe you don't. But did you get this feeling from them prior to the Giants game that they felt Zach Wilson, it was going to be a longer term injury, or were they hoping maybe he'd be back for Baltimore?
Yeah, my sense from inside the facility was, without anyone saying it definitively, they did not expect him back for week one. And in fact, I didn't think they expected him to play the first 3 weeks. But that was me drawing conclusions from some conversations that I had, never from the head coach and never from any of the other position players. They certainly were not in a place where they could answer that question with any authority. Robert Saleh probably had more insight, but at the time, there was still a wait and see attitude. As far as what took place this week, I don't believe it was gamesmanship. I don't necessarily think that they were throwing the Ravens' schedule off kilter by tossing out the idea. There might have been a general feeling behind the scenes that he had been progressing along, but hadn't had that one meeting with the medical staff that was going to truly determine his status. What surprised people is the jump from ooh, we may see him week 1 to, hey, you're not going to see him for a while. And that's where you get this chain reaction from Jets fans, local media, national media. The goal is to avoid drama. The goal is to go out there and let your play on the field speak for itself and then answer the questions. When drama is created and it's self-inflicted, that's where you look back and think, hey, maybe this could have been handled differently. I think Robert Saleh, in my experience meeting with him, is forthright and honest and certainly still learning the ropes. But when you become a head coach in the NFL, this has become abundantly clear more than any other time in professional football history. You really are the true spokesman for the team. You're up there 3 times a week at least doing various media. And oftentimes you're dealing with questions that can be beyond your purview because they're medical questions, they're personnel questions, and those aren't necessarily your responsibilities. But because you're an authoritative figure and the cameras are rolling and the microphones are in front of you, you do feel the need to say something of value. There are some coaches that say very little, and they've just accepted that they're going to give you vanilla responses, and sometimes that can be frustrating for a fan base and for local and national media. I think Robert Saleh has gone into this because he emerged as a real candidate for head coaching positions based on his fiery personality and his ability to communicate and connect with people. And that's what helped get him to this spot. So he's giving you his natural personality, and he's giving you the warmth that has made him what he is and where he is today. But there are going to be some pitfalls along the way, and this is one where it's not semantics. This was something that took on a life of its own earlier in the week, and then when you get a 180, you just can't expect people to say, "Oh, okay, no big deal." There's going to be a reaction. For every action, there's a reaction, and the action was the announcement that Zach Wilson wasn't going to be around. He could have played the game. He could have said, hey, he's not playing this week. We'll reassess next week. And then it would have been a topic again and again. I think they felt this is going to help them avoid having to deal with this. But what it did was create a little bit of a mushroom effect in this opening week of the season when the focus should be on the players and their preparation and this matchup against Baltimore. And it turns into more of a debate on how the information was being parsed out and how they should have handled it.
Of course, Ian joining us can only mean one thing. The beginning of the NFL season is right around the corner. That means it's fall. And as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to make your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. And every day I check LinkedIn Jobs just to make sure Locked On is not looking for a new Locked On Jets host. So far, so good. So at least for now, I'm not in any danger of being replaced. However, LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Again, that's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's move forward a few weeks. Let's imagine Zach Wilson's back in the lineup week 4 against Pittsburgh. Do you get the sense from the Jets that expectations are still as high for Zach Wilson as they were a year ago after, it was kind of a disappointing rookie season? Is this still a franchise that believes Zach Wilson's ceiling is sky high?
Yeah, I think if you hooked them up to a lie detector test, if Robert Saleh was hooked up to that, if Joe Douglas was hooked up to that, if Mike LaFleur was hooked up to that, they'd all say that they think Zach Wilson can be a star in the NFL, and they would all pass. I believe they all believe it. But we know in the NFL, you are judged on what you do on Sundays. So you could talk about the ceiling, you could talk about the abilities, you could talk about how well he is doing in practice, how his teammates respond to him, the leadership, the natural skills. You have to go out and do it. There have been plenty of quarterbacks that have come into the NFL that have not had that ability to just put it all together. They've got a great arm, they're mobile, they're considered studious, they're the whole package. But for some reason, it just doesn't translate. I'm certainly not saying that that's where Zach is at. He's played one season in the NFL. His second season has been postponed and paused because of this injury. So we're often in a position to form very strong opinions and feel like you've got to take a stand. It's incomplete right now. And I think it's impossible to forecast based on last year and that offensive line and the lack of weapons to say, well, this is it. This is who he's going to be. There is an evolution. There is a learning curve in the NFL. And he certainly has the abilities to take a big step forward. But the proof is in the pudding. There's no getting around that part of the equation.
How confident do you think the Jets are that Joe Flacco can manage this team the first couple weeks of the season?
Well, if you talk to them, they exude confidence that Joe has command of this offense and has the respect of his teammates and obviously has done it before. The issue is he's 37 years old. It's been a while since he's been consistent and has been productive. And even at the back end of his Baltimore tenure, it was going in the wrong direction. Can he still sling it? Absolutely. Has he seen it all in the NFL? Yes, completely. But it's still a tall order. This is not a case where Joe Flacco would be a starter for any other team in the NFL. There's a reason why he was brought back. There's a reason why they thought he was a good fit for this quarterback room. And there's a reason why he is a backup at this stage of his career. We sat down with Joe prior to the Giants game, and he was great. It's amazing to me. I did a bunch of his games, his rookie year, his second year, his third year. And Joe was always very level, not too high, not too low, but it was hard to get him to crack a smile. At one point during those early years of his career, I just made it my focus to try to say something in these production meetings that would make him laugh, because I knew there was a human being there, and I knew there was someone that was just at that point in his career trying to get through the day and live up to the billing of being a first round pick and potentially a franchise quarterback. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I was successful because you could crack the veneer with him. To now fast forward in year 15 in the NFL, he's a different guy. This is a guy who's won a championship, has made a ton of money, and is doing this because he still loves it. He doesn't have to do this anymore. He's doing it because he still enjoys the competition. He still enjoys the camaraderie, and there's still a competitive spirit inside of him to try to go out and win football games. But I don't think this was the plan. And certainly if the offense sputters in week 1, there will be question marks going into week 2. Mike White is still on this roster for a reason. And the same thing week 2 into week 3. They're not married to the idea that Joe Flacco has got to be the guy. They're asking him to go in and just try to steady the ship, and maybe some of his savviness and experience can rub off on this offense. But the idea, and look, the Chris Streveler story was fantastic. It was fun for a play-by-play guy in the preseason. Trust me, I've done enough of these games through the years. It can sometimes be a slog getting through the games because most of the players that you're focused in on are not going to make the team. And if anything, they've expanded the practice squad. So there are names that bounce around a little bit and you hear of them or you see them pop up in a newspaper report, but they're not a big part of the team. Or they're the 51st, 52nd, 53rd man on a roster. Chris Streveler, it was insane what he did in the preseason. It was a blast. But the reality was they were invested in Mike White for a reason. He knows the offense. They trust him. We saw flashes last year. And I think if the Jets are not happy with the way things go in week one, then that becomes an option. If Joe plays well, if the Jets win the game and Flacco's in the middle of it, made a couple of big throws and handled the pressure and the situation, then they'll keep rolling with Joe. But I don't think it's steadfast and true at this point that, no, it's Flacco or bust for the New York Jets.
Interesting. I am creating a quarterback controversy for us.
No,
today.
not at all. just living in reality of, what the expectations are. This offense has been built on Zach Wilson running it and his mobility and how he can create some things with his arm and his athleticism. This was not built for Joe Flacco. He's in there because he's experienced and he's the number 2 guy. And I do think he provides confidence to younger players in that locker room that have seen Joe Flacco through the years. That was something we talked about with Garrett Wilson. Garrett, who, by the way, impressive, like really blown away by his knowledge and his smarts, and even just in a production meeting setting when a younger guy looks you in the eye and really immerses himself in the questions and answer session, you walk away and it resonates in some form. But he made mention of it that, man, I'm with Joe Flacco. Like, I watched this guy growing up. I watched this guy win a Super Bowl. So there is still a little bit of that. Joe brings a presence, and that could go a long way if this team can rally around it. And clearly results matter. But look, I think the Jets are trying to figure out ways to win games. That's what's important right now. Look at the numbers. John, you know this probably better than I do. They haven't won a whole lot of September games in a long time. When you dig that deep of a hole every year, it makes the rest of the season feel very long. And it makes you start thinking about next year and next year and next year. And the Jets want to start dealing with the present, the here and now. But you got to win early in the season to create that culture where that becomes expected.
Truer words have seldom been spoken, Ian. Let's talk about this run game, because the way I view it, and you can tell me whether I'm wrong on this, it seems to me like the Jets want to build this offense, whether Zach Wilson's in, whether it's Joe Flacco, whether it's Mike White, Chris Streveler, maybe, probably not, but it seems like they want to build around this run game. And, I look at Joe Douglas's tenure with the Jets, and he really has not invested many resources in the running back position. And that changed this year in the draft when they traded up in the second round for Breece Hall. And to me, what that says is the fact that Joe Douglas, a guy who doesn't really invest a lot at the running back position, is trading up in the second round for a guy. They think this is a really special player and the type of guy who could maybe change this offense. You can tell me whether I'm wrong or not on that.
No, I think you're right. I think they were blown away by the fact that they could get him and that other teams didn't jump on Breece Hall in the draft and were thrilled that he was there. And you're right. They made sure they invested to make sure that Breece Hall was going to be a part of this team. When talking to Robert Saleh, when having a chat with Joe Douglas, I think what stands out is the subtlety in which Hall goes about his business. It's something, at least the way that Coach Saleh explained it to us, there's just something there innately that makes tacklers miss. He's got that feel, and that's just something that you have. It's not a learned trait. Some guys can develop and figure it out, but it seems like they believe Breece Hall, it's just natural to his running style, and the sky's the limit in their eyes. Now, how this all shakes out, I'm not sure. I think they really like Michael Carter, and they believe he's going to be a part of this offense. His numbers last year were solid for a team that couldn't quite establish the run the way that you would have hoped that they could. And eventually, if this offense is going to be what they visualize it to be, I think you're right. I think they view the running game as the bread and butter potentially to help set up Zach Wilson and Boots and some other misdirections that eventually could play into it. And that includes even Elijah Moore on some jet sweeps, and the fact that this team just has more explosive players than they had a year ago. And I would put Breece Hall in that category. So everything you said is part and parcel with what they want to do. Obviously, it plays into the offensive line, which is now going through another phase of injuries and adjustments and pivoting. And it's a tough way to open up when you thought you had a guy that you didn't have to worry about on that left side who's been doing it forever. And now you got to take George Fant, who you've switched from one side to the other already during this preseason and training camp, and ask him to go back to that left tackle position and then rely on a rookie who they may have some faith in, but he's still a rookie playing tackle in the NFL. So big question marks that could certainly have a cause and effect on the running game that you mentioned.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, because even with Dwayne Brown in there, and it's not really clear what's going on yet, but even if he's in there, I mean, I think I saw in that Giants game, it looked like they were really struggling to run block. And that's something I kind of expected, because it's really difficult to throw a guy in there in the middle of training camp. The offensive line's based on chemistry, it's based on continuity. So even though, let's just say Dwayne Brown's in there, even if Dwayne Brown's in there, you have 5 guys who are pretty solid players on paper, but I feel like it's going to take some time for the line to function as a unit. And of course, if Dwayne Brown's out and you got Max Mitchell in there, you throw in all the elements you discussed. So even though I am kind of optimistic about this offensive line, if health is there in the long run, I think in the early stage of the season, there could be some growing pains.
Yeah, I think they were just hoping Dwayne Brown's experience and his physical makeup was going to be enough for them to get by early until the chemistry part developed. And Dwayne Brown is still a mountain of a man. That hasn't changed. When he showed up on the practice field, he stood out. You looked over and thought, ooh, that's a Pro Bowler. That's a different level. But getting back into form and getting through some of the rust, that was understandable. Now, a potential injury setback, you have no idea how that plays out, and the musical chairs that has taken place at that tackle position continues. And George Fant has been a pro and actually did a very good job last year under trying circumstances. He, I don't think, signed with the idea that he would be the left tackle of the New York Jets, but that's the way it worked out based on the Mekhi Becton injury. And they have invested money. Laken Tomlinson was given a large contract at 3 years, $40 million. Obviously, they had very little leverage in the Dwayne Brown conversations, and Brown may have signed with Dallas. If this had been a week later, he might have already been gone. So they recognized that they had salary cap room, they had a need, and they tried to address it the best way that they could. Sometimes you also just have bad luck, and the Jets seem to have that quite often. But this is your best laid plans not coming to fruition, and you're dealing with the bitter reality of what could be the lifeblood of this offense affecting the run game and pass protection. And here you are in week one, and you're already dealing with serious challenges.
Ian is with us today to prepare us for the beginning of the 2022 NFL season. Actually, it began last night as the Bills played the Rams. The Jets open this Sunday, however. And if you want to place money down on that game or any other game, you should know that betonline.net is your number one source for all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. You can find all of the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information. That includes live betting, esports, and scores. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events. That includes the NFL. It also includes Major League Baseball, races coming down to the wire there. It includes MMA, boxing. It includes golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Let's talk about the passing game a little bit because I'm really interested to see what the hierarchy is as far as Zach Wilson and Joe Flacco's pass catching targets go. I kind of feel like Elijah Moore might be the go-to guy, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on, who's the number one guy, who's the number two. And, we could throw the tight ends in there because the Jets, of course, signed a pair of tight ends in free agency. Who do you think this passing game runs through?
I think the tight ends are going to play a huge role with Uzama and Conklin. They feel very good about that combination, about what they can bring. Conklin, to me, flashed in the preseason as a big-time weapon and someone that they're going to lean on. Uzama was not featured quite as much, but I've seen a bunch of him through my time covering the Cincinnati Bengals. He's now an eighth-year pro. I think he was one of those guys that had been a little bit under the radar, and then last year with the Bengals' great run and his play in some big moments, it opened some eyes. Obviously, it opened the Jets' eyes. He signed him to a 3-year, $24 million deal. They signed Conklin to a 3-year, $21 million deal. So the tight ends will be a big part of it. My sense on the wide receivers, Corey Davis is a pro. He's well respected in the locker room. He was certainly paid well when he signed a big deal prior to last season. I don't know if they see him as a true number one, probably not. And that might be the reason why Elijah Moore is a candidate to be a potential go-to guy. We saw spurts last year. We saw his ability to separate, and we saw the burst that he has. But in this league with wide receivers, the great ones find a way every week. Every week you look up and it's 5 catches for 89 yards, or it's one of those bigger weeks, 7 catches for 122 yards. That's a big ask right now for Elijah Moore to really make that kind of jump. So I'm not sure what the expectation level is. I know from Elijah, it's sky's the limit. And then, it gets really interesting. Garrett Wilson, we didn't see a whole lot in the preseason. We hear a lot about Garrett and his smooth, fluid nature and his leaping skills and his dynamic potential after the catch. We just didn't see it. I think like any young wide receiver, there's a physical part that you come into the league and you're dealing with guys that are going to get right in your face. And in college, you had the ability to get around them because of your skills and your speed. And at this level, it's just not that simple. So there is an adjustment period, and he's not the biggest guy. It's going to be a big jump for him physically, and then just the polish. Garrett came on very strong second half of last season. That's where I think scouts got wowed at his raw ability. But I'm not sure what they see for his rookie year, and if the expectation is it's going to take a little bit of time. He's 22 years old, and I don't know if it's automatic. I don't think it's a snap your fingers and he's a star right away. You've got Braxton Berrios, who they definitely rely on and believe in, and I think he and Zach have developed very good chemistry. And then that whole other layer of Denzel Mims and the opportunity that he wants. He obviously stood out against second and third teamers in the final preseason game. At that point, we didn't know if the Jets were serious about trading him. I'm not sure they ever truly were, because they realized the compensation was not going to be to their liking. They used a second-round pick on Denzel Mims in 2020 to get back a conditional 7th or 6th. Is not going to cut it when the goal, as we see now with other positions, to maintain your depth. So I understood where Joe Douglas was coming from on this one. I understand that Denzel has been frustrated trying to crack the starting lineup, but we know in this league, opportunities happen. You just have to be ready for them.
That's all for our episode today. Thanks to Ian for joining me, but Ian's not done. He'll be back tomorrow. We'll have a special Saturday episode to conclude our season preview with Ian Eagle. But until then, this has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. We're a daily podcast. New episodes each day, Monday through Friday, and this week, Saturday. Big shout out to subscribers to this show. To join that group, hit the subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. You'll receive notifications as new episodes are posted, so you'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source and enjoy the show, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Both of these help the channel out, and these help other Jets fans find the podcast. Have a great Friday, everybody. And again, we'll be back tomorrow with a special Saturday episode to conclude our season preview with Ian Eagle.